Hi, this is Dr. Lassane back at you again with another screencast about LSSL 5385, also known as the Young Adult Literature class. I want to spend some time during this screencast going over the assignments from the syllabus. And so if you navigate to your LiveBinder site for this class and log in, remembering that the key, the code that you need is the word key. You'll see the tabs across the top, and we talked about this in the last screencast. Since I want to look at the syllabus, I'm going to click on the syllabus tab, and I've got a link here that will open. You can go ahead and save that to your desktop if you like. I don't need to. It's already at my desktop, so I'm simply going to open it here at LiveBinder so as not to have more than one thing going on at the same time. I get a message, of course, that it's downloading from the site, which I hope is true. It might take, there we go, just a few seconds to come in. But here's the syllabus for the class. And I'm going to take you through some of it. Some of it is just what needs to be in a syllabus for the university. It may or may not be information that's going to be important to you. I will, however, hope that you take a look at this syllabus before class starts and that you refer to it during class, because I think it contains a lot of useful information too. And so let me point out what I think are the most useful pieces to you at this time. The first is right here on the first page, where it's got all the information about getting in touch with me. Notice my office phone, the fax machine that's in the office, the address of the office, and a couple different email addresses that you can use. They're both basically the same one. They come to me at Sam Houston, and I'm pretty good about answering email. If you send me a question, I try to get back to you within 24 hours of that question being asked. Sometimes that's just not something that I can do, but for the most part, I strive to get back to you just as soon as possible. So if you don't hear from me after a day, go ahead and email me again, but don't email me 3 times in the same day, because if I'm not getting right back to you, it means I'm probably somewhere where I can't access my email. My office hours, if you want to talk to me, are generally on Mondays. I'm there at the office between the hours of 8 and 4. Sometimes I'm in a meeting, but for the most part, I'm there in my office and you can talk to me then. You've got my office number right there. The next important piece to look at for this class has to do with textbooks. The required textbook for the class is one that I wrote. It's called Making the Match, the Right Book for the Right Reader at the Right Time. It's a Stenhouse publication. It's available from the University Bookstore, from the publisher itself, stenhouse.com. It's also available on Amazon or any other online bookseller, and it is available in Kindle edition from Amazon as well. I actually have my own Kindle edition because I find it really useful for me to have the textbook that I can kind of carry with me everywhere that I carry my iPad, which has my Kindle app on it. You can share a textbook if you live close to somebody and you don't mind kind of going back and forth on that, but it is a book that you will need for the class. There are specific examples that are based in the textbook. The other required books for the class are young adult novels, and you see them here listed. And I want to take just a few minutes to go through these books and talk to you about each of them and to give you some idea about why they're here. I know that this is a long reading list. I know that reading will take a lot of time for you this semester. However, because the certification in library science is a K-12 certificate, we need to be sure that you know not just children's books, but you know books for tweens and teens. And while this seems like a very long list, it's really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes down to things. So I've made some decisions about what it is that you'll be reading based on what I know is out there and what I think you need to know going out into the field. So let's kind of start at the top and work down some really quick talk about some of these books. You'll read Sherman Alexie's The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. This is a National Book Award winner, which means that it won a $10,000 cash prize for the author as the most literary young adult novel or book for young people that was published in 2007. It is an absolutely wonderful book that focuses on a young man named Junior who's a Native American, and he's basically lives on the reservation and understands that unless he leaves the res and goes to a different school, he's not going to get the education that he needs to be successful. And so off he goes with the support of his parents to a school where he is the token, the part-time Indian there. It's funny, it's brash, it's sad, it's everything you want in a young adult novel. Alexi also writes for adults very well too. You're going to read 2 books by Laurie Haltz Anderson. You're going to read her classic Speak, which was a Prince Honor book, one of the first ever awarded, and it deals with acquaintance rape. You're going to read Chains, which is part of a trilogy of historical fiction that she has written about slaves and their existence during the Revolutionary War. You're going to read Anne Angel's Janis Joplin, Rise Up Singing, winner of the YALSA Excellence in Nonfiction Award from 2011. I happened to be on that committee that year, and this is certainly a favorite of mine. I grew up listening to Janis Joplin, certainly one of my favorite singers of all times. And what I love about this narrative nonfiction, this biography of Janis Joplin, is that it goes beyond the surface to really get to know the person, behind the book. You're going to be reading Jeannie Atkinson's Borrowed Names. Borrowed Names is a novel in verse, which are biographies of the daughters of 3 famous women. I hope you got all that there. It's a novel in verse biography of daughters of famous women. This pushes the envelope in terms of what books can do, and it's fascinating to look at the daughters of Laura Ingalls Wilder, for example, and Madame Curie. It's just an interesting way to approach this topic. You're going to read Tyrell by Co Booth. Tyrell is sometimes considered urban fiction. I just consider it an awfully good debut novel. Tyrell lives in the projects. His father's in prison. His mother and his younger brother and Tyrell have just been evicted from their apartment because they can't pay their rent, and they're living in temporary housing. It's kind of a flop house hotel, and Tyrell wants more than anything to find a way to make money to get the family back together in their apartment. Beauty Queens by Libba Bray, because we've got to read some funny books, and this is an hysterical parody of reality-based television shows and beauty pageants kind of mashed up together. A plane carrying Miss Teen Queen beauty contestants crash lands on what is supposed to be a deserted island, and these teenage girls who know nothing except makeup tips and how to keep your swimsuit from crawling into wrong places, they have to figure out how to survive on this desert island. It is funny. We're going to be reading The Tequila Worm by Viola Canales. This is one of the winners of the Pura Belpre Award, given for Hispanic characters and Hispanic authors. It's set in South Texas, and for those of you who have ever been down to the Rio Grande Valley, you will probably recognize the initial location for this book at least. The book shifts setting to a private school in Austin, which is where our main character ends up going, because much like Junior, she knows that in order to get a good education, she's going to have to go to a top-notch school. We're going to read Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games because 12 million kids can't be wrong. This used to be the Harry Potter book, if you will, on reading lists from the 90s, but because of the Hunger Games, and especially because of the movie and how popular this series has gotten, I want to make sure that you are familiar with the book and not just with the movie. We will read Robert Cormier's The Chocolate War. This is one of the oldest books on the list. It will always be on my reading list in young adult literature. Cormier was an adult author who came to young adult literature later in his career and wrote some of the most uncompromising books about bullying, about ethics, about very troubling situations. These are books that are grim, but they're very truthful and I think incredibly well written. For Chris Crutcher, we're going to read a collection of short stories called Athletic Shorts. Very few people know that Crutcher writes short stories. What is interesting about Athletic Shorts is that the main characters in these stories are all characters from his longer works, from Stoughton and Running Loose and Staying Fat for Sarah Burns. They all show up as characters here in Athletic Shorts. We're going to read the graphic novel Hereville by Barry Deutsch. Herville is the story of an Orthodox Jew, a young woman named Mirka, who wants to get a sword and go out and slay monsters. It's an interesting combination of religion and mythology, and I think you'll enjoy it. I certainly love the illustrations. I think this is a beautifully done graphic novel. A novel in verse is what comes up next with Margarita Engel's The Firefly Letters. It's based on the true life of a suffragette, a woman who came to Cuba and who studied culture, especially the culture of women. And Margarita Engel's books have all been novels in verse, all just beautifully written novels in verse, and basically all looking at Hispanic culture, especially Cuban culture, because that's where her grandparents were born, and she used to go visit when she was a young child. We're looking at Betsy Franco's collection of poems in You Hear Me. It is a collection of writing from teenage girls, and it's a fascinating way, I think, of looking at poetry from teens themselves. Nancy Garden's Annie on My Mind is another one of those books that will probably always be on my reading list. It went all the way to the state Supreme Court in Kansas, where it was voted, where the justices voted that it should remain on the shelf and not be removed. As you read it, I'm sure you will understand that it's always been one of those books that's been frequently challenged. It's one of the first books we see in young adult literature that deals with LGBTQ issues. A relatively new book on the list is A Tale Dark and Grim by Adam Gidwitz. It is a book that takes some of the grim fairy tales and just totally re-envisions them. It's certainly a book that needs to be read out loud. Even if you're just reading it to yourself, I think you'll enjoy that experience. It's also a wonderful audiobook. John Green's Looking for Alaska was a Prince Award winner. It was also his first book, and he's gone on to win another Prince and certainly write lots of books that have gotten incredibly good reviews. Looking for Alaska is the 21st century version of Catcher in the Rye. Another fairly new book on the list is Daniel Handler's book, Why We Broke Up. You probably know Handler better as Lemony Snicket, and here he is writing for young adults with a beautifully illustrated book. The illustrations by Myra Kalman are just astonishing in this book. This book is one long letter from a girl to the boy she's just broken up with, and it just has teen experience at its core, and it absolutely gets it all right. Roby Harris's It's Perfectly Normal is a book about sex and sexuality, and of course you can imagine that it's a book that is often on the banned book list. It's nonfiction. As is the next book, Charles and Emma, The Darwin's Leap of Faith, a beautiful biography by Deborah Heiligman that was recognized as a Prince Honor Book in 2010. No More Dead Dogs by Gordon Corman, another of our we need to have some funny books to read in young adult literature as well. The story of a boy who hates dead dog books and his English teacher who loves them. David Lubar's Attack of the Vampire Weenie and Other Warped and Creepy Tales, or any of the titles in this series. And there's Lawn Weenie, there's, I can't even remember all the other weenie titles, but you'll be able to find them in a quick search. These are short stories, and by short I mean 1 page, 2 page, maybe bleeding onto a 3rd page sometimes. And they're all just funny, creepy kind of short stories. I think you'll enjoy the reading immensely. We're reading Monster by Walter Dean Myers. It's the first ever winner of the Prince Award. It is a book that's in a very different format. It's done as a film script, and in places it looks like a diary. And it's the story of a 17-year-old who's on trial for his life, accused of participating in a robbery where the shop owner was murdered. Patrick Ness's Knife of Never Letting Go is going to be a great companion to Hunger Games. In my own opinion, I think it's a much stronger book from a literary perspective than Hunger Games. It's a trilogy. The Knife of Never Letting Go is the first one. You can certainly read either one of the other 2 books, should you decide to do so. The Ask and the Answer and Monsters of Men are the other 2 titles in this series. Julie Peters' Luna. I knew I had the first name wrong. Julie Peters' Luna is the story of a transgendered person. Liam, who knows that he has been born into the wrong body, insists on being called Luna, is saving up for a sex change operation. This is one of the first books, as you might imagine, in the LGBTQ field that explores this particular aspect. We're reading a graphic novel version of The Little Prince by Antoine Saint-Exupéry. You're going to have to do some digging and look for this one, and make sure you don't get it in the original French, because that will be very confusing. The Little Prince is a fabulous story, one I certainly remember reading more than once through my English literature studies, and here it is in graphic novel form. Local author René Saldana is an English professor here in Texas, and his newest book from Pinata Books, based out of Houston, Arte Publico is the major imprint, is called Dancing with the Devil and Other Tales from Beyond. It is available in a bilingual version, and it's all about superstitions, including La Llorona, but not limited to that as well. We're going to be looking at another multicultural book with Marjane Satrapi's Persepolis, a graphic novel. You can also read the sequel, Persepolis 2, and understand that this book was made into a movie as well. We're going to read another story collection with John Sheska's Guys Read Funny Business. This is a collection of short stories written by very familiar people, Christopher Paul Curtis being one of them. Kate DiCamillo's in here, as is John Sheska, and a bunch of other people who know how to write funny books for kids. Another of our poetry books is Gary Soto's Neighborhood Odes. Odes about chicharrones, odes about chihuahuas, odes about new shoes, odes about what may seem to be mundane but absolutely are important things in the lives of the people who populate these poems. Sean Tan's Tales from Outer Suburbia is a beautifully illustrated book, one that shows how different books for tweens and teens can look. And Raina Telgemeier's Smile is a graphic novel that won lots of awards, including, I think, a stint on either the Bluebonnet or the Lone Star list. I can't remember which of the two. It's about a girl who trips and falls one day, does severe damage to her teeth, and has a lifetime of braces coming up in front of her. Terry Truman's Stuck in Neutral is one of the first ever winners of a Prince Honor book, and it is about a boy who suffers from cerebral palsy, and he is the narrator for this particular story. Scott Westerfeld's Leviathan is a great example of steampunk. If you're not familiar with steampunk, take a few minutes. You can absolutely go to Wikipedia here and look up the word steampunk and find that it's not new, but it is new in the field of young adult literature. It's been kind of hanging around in adult literature for a while. It's set during World War II, but it has contemporary kinds of inventions going on there. It's an incredible book. And we're going to read Twilight, the graphic novel by Kim Yong-bin, based on the work of Stephanie Meyer, but much, much shorter, and I think a whole lot more interesting. It's certainly one of the trends we see in books, this idea of here's a graphic novel based on a story that you may or may not know, but you probably do know unless you've been living underground. So those are the books that are required for class. In the next screencast, we're going to talk about the assignments for these books. I hope this has helped you a little, and get ready for the next screencast.